The survey ship Quiet Current had been drifting through the expanse for 6 days on what was supposed to be the dullest assignment of the entire fiscal cycle. Mapping a dead system nobody in the Ashen Conquered had bothered to chart in 3 centuries. Captain Ara had taken the job because dull assignments paid on time and never got anyone killed. She was beginning to regret that logic. "Captain, you need to see this," said her navigator, and something in his voice made her set down her ration bar and cross the bridge in 4 strides. The long-range sensor sweep had returned a mass reading that made no sense. Not a moon, not an asteroid. Something with a hull signature, metal, alloyed, artificial, tumbling slowly through a ring of ancient debris like it had been sleeping there since before the Conquered itself existed. "Scale it up," Ara said. His claws trembled slightly over the console as the image resolved. 14 kilometers, stem to stern. A shape built with the brutal, confident geometry of something meant to be feared, armored plating in overlapping bands, weapon emplacements the size of small starships jutting from its flanks, and a spine of docking arms folded in like the ribs of some vast, sleeping predator. "That's not possible," whispered. "Nobody builds ships that size, not the shipyards, not the old war clans. Not even the threshold wardens at the height of their empire ever fielded anything past 4 kilometers. Ara didn't answer immediately. She was staring at the hull markings the ship's translator matrix had already tried and failed to parse 3 separate times. A language pattern with no match anywhere in 900 catalogued species. Behind her, the ship's junior officers had gone quiet in that particular way crews go quiet when they sense their captain is about to make a decision that will follow them for the rest of their careers. "Systems report," she said. "Is it live?" "Negative on active power, negative on weapons signatures, negative on any drive emissions," the engineer called back. "It's cold, Captain, dead cold. Whatever that thing is, it's been dead a very long time." "Then why," Ara murmured almost to herself, "does it feel like it's watching us?" She dismissed the thought as fatigue and gave the order anyway. "Bring us in. Slow approach, full passive scans only, and somebody wake up. If there's a story on that hull, I want our historian reading it before anyone else touches a single button." The Quiet Current nosed forward into the debris ring, threading between frozen chunks of what might once have been companion vessels, escort ships, maybe even entire fleets. Nobody could tell anymore. They'd been shattered and scattered for so long that only twisted geometry remained. As they closed the distance, the derelict grew from a shape into a landscape, an entire dark world unto itself, and every member of the bridge crew fell silent one by one without anyone ordering it. Ara had commanded 3 tour through actual. She had seen dead ships before, burned-out hulks that still smelled of scorched metal decades later, wrecks with skeletons still strapped into their chairs. None of it had prepared her for the particular, specific dread of approaching something this large, this old, and this intact. Because that was the detail that kept snagging in her mind as the passive sensors fed back more data. The hull showed no micrometeorite scarring where it should have accumulated over, no frost buildup consistent with a true derelict, no orbital drift decay that matched the age the debris field around it clearly suggested. It looked, against every law of physics and probability she understood, maintained. "So wake and inbound to the bridge," someone reported. "Good," Ara said, eyes fixed on the looming shadow now filling half the forward viewport. "Because I think we just found something that was never meant to be forgotten. I just don't know yet whether that's a blessing or a warning." Arrived on the bridge, still fastening her research harness, her eyes puffy from interrupted sleep, and immediately alert the moment she saw the viewport. As the Quiet Current's historian and linguist, she had spent 11 years of her career translating dead languages off the bones of collapsed empires. Nothing had ever made her stop mid-stride the way this did. "That's not a wreck," she said. "Wrecks don't look like that." "That's what I said," muttered. They brought the survey ship in slow, running a full passive LiDAR sweep across the derelict's flank as they went, building a wireframe model on the main display piece by piece. The scale was staggering enough on sensors. Up close, through the actual viewport glass, it was something else entirely, a wall of dark alloy stretching in every direction, swallowing the weak red light of the system's dying star and giving almost nothing back. "There," said suddenly pointing. "Bring us starboard 15 degrees, I saw something." Ara gave the order. The ship drifted, and the running lights caught a section of hull previously in shadow, and there, raised 3 meters tall in cold, deliberate lettering, was writing. Not etched by damage, not scored by debris impact, cast into the metal itself, part of the original construction meant to be read. Translator Matrix chewed through the shapes for nearly a full minute before spitting out fragments. H-U-M, she read aloud, tracing the pattern on her display with a shaking claw. The letter forms are consistent, deliberate. Whoever built this wasn't hiding it. They wanted this found. This was meant to be read by someone someday. By who? Asked. There's no active beacon, no distress signal. It's been broadcasting nothing for who knows how long. Maybe, said slowly, the message wasn't meant to be heard, just remembered. There's a difference. They continued the sweep, and near what appeared to be the derelict's primary spine, close to a section that looked unmistakably like a docking collar built to human unknown proportions, found the designation plate. Weathered by time but still legible, still proud in its craftsmanship. UNS Dreadnought, Daybreak's Promise. A name, Ara said quietly, staring at the words. In the Ashen Concord's military tradition, ships were given serial numbers, not names. Only the old cultures, the ones from Concord folklore, the pre-unification clans, had once named their vessels. It was considered sentimental, inefficient. Ships that get names, said, echoing something her grandmother used to tell her as a child, are ships that were loved by someone. The bridge went quiet again. Even who filled silences reflexively out of nervous habit said nothing. Ara straightened, pushing the strange tightness in her chest back down where she could ignore it. Assemble a boarding team. 6, no more. Full environmental suits, full recording rigs. I want on point for anything linguistic, and I want weapons kept holstered unless something actually shoots at us. You think something's still alive in there? Asked. No, Ara said, looking back out at the vast dark hull swallowing their running lights. I think something's still awake in there, and I don't think those are the same thing at all. Nobody on the bridge disagreed with her. Nobody wanted to say it out loud, either. But as the boarding team assembled in the airlock bay, checking each other's suit seals with more care than the routine strictly required, every one of them carried the same unspoken thought. They weren't preparing to board a wreck. They were preparing to enter a grave. And graves, in every culture the Ashen Concord had ever catalogued, deserved to be approached with respect. Because sometimes, against all reason, they weren't as empty as they appeared. The airlock cycled without resistance. That was the detail that unsettled Ara most as she led the boarding team through the derelict's outer hull. After 11,000 years of drift, by the debris field's geological dating, the ship's outer mechanisms still answered to the quiet current standard docking protocol like a courteous host opening a door for expected guests. Atmosphere reading, her engineer called out, voice tight through the suit comm. Captain, there's still pressure in here, thin but present, breathable range composition. Whatever kept this hull sealed for 11 is still functioning. Do not remove helmets, Ara ordered, though nobody had suggested it. The instruction was as much for her own nerves as theirs. The corridor beyond the airlock was built to a scale that made every member of the boarding party feel suddenly, uncomfortably small. Handrails sat at a height that would have required Ara to reach above her own head. Doorways loomed twice the height of any of them. Whatever species had built this ship, they had been enormous, and they had built their home to fit themselves without compromise. Whoever they were, murmured, craning his neck to look up at the ceiling, they didn't build small. Found the first mural 6 decks in, and the moment her suit lights fell across it, she stopped walking entirely. It stretched the length of an entire corridor wall, a stylized image of a world rendered in blues and greens, a single pale moon orbiting beside it, rendered with the unmistakable tenderness of an artist depicting something beloved and lost. Beneath it, carved into the metal in rows too numerous to easily count, were names. Thousands of them. Ran her scanner across a section, and the count kept climbing before she finally stopped it, hands unsteady. This is a memorial, she said. This whole wall, these are names of the dead. How many? Aura asked. I stopped counting at 40,000. Nobody spoke for a long moment. The weight of the number settled over the boarding party like a physical thing. Ara reached out and pressed her gloved palm against the metal beneath the mural. Through the suit's haptic sensors, she registered something that made no sense at all. It's warm, she said. That's not possible, her engineer replied automatically, already moving to confirm with his own instruments. He ran the scan twice before reporting back, voice noticeably less steady than before. Confirmed, Captain. There's residual thermal output throughout this section. Not machine cold, not ambient cold. Something in this ship has been generating low-level heat this entire time. For 11,000 years, his voice cracked slightly on the number. Life support is active, the engineer continued, checking a secondary reading. Minimal, barely above dormant threshold, but active. Whatever is keeping this ship's systems alive has been doing it continuously since before any conquered world had a written language. Ara looked down the endless dark corridor stretching ahead of them, lit only by their suit lamps and the faint memorial glow of the mural behind them, and felt the particular cold that has nothing to do with temperature settle into her chest. Something on this ship, she said quietly, has been keeping watch for 11,000 years, alone. She thought of the name etched into the hull outside, Daybreak's Promise, a ship named with love, carrying 40,000 names of the dead, still breathing after 11 of silence. She said, I think we need to find out exactly what or who has been standing guard in here, because nothing waits that long without a reason. They pressed deeper into the ship, and behind them, unnoticed by any of their instruments, a single indicator light along the corridor's ceiling flickered on for the first time in 11,000 years, and then quietly went dark again, as if reconsidering. The bridge sat at the very spine of the ship, and reaching it took the boarding party nearly 2 hours of careful movement through corridors, cargo holds, and what identified, with a historian's mounting excitement fighting against her own unease, as cryogenic storage bays stretching in endless rows into the darkness beyond their suit lights. 40,000 pods, she said, her voice hushed with something between reverence and grief. This must be where they were, the names on the mural. Ara didn't linger. Something about the rows of dark, silent chambers made her skin crawl in a way the memorial wall hadn't, and she pushed the team onward toward the bridge with more urgency than she meant to show. The command deck, when they finally reached it, was a cathedral of dead consoles and dust-furred chairs built for occupants who would have towered over the entire boarding party even seated. Scanner picked out skeletal fragments in 2 of the chairs, brittle, ancient, undisturbed and confirmed what the ship's proportions had already suggested. Bipedal, 5-fingered, roughly 2 meters at the shoulder, even seated in a command chair. At the exact center of the bridge stood a single obelisk of dark, unmarked material, humming so faintly beneath their boots that Ara initially dismissed it as her own suit's life support cycling. Do not touch anything, she ordered, scanning the chamber. 3 meters away, examining the obelisk with obvious fascination, rested his palm against its surface before the words had fully left her mouth. The lights came on all at once, not with the stutter and flicker of failing ancient machinery, but with the calm, sure confidence of something that had simply, finally, been given a reason to wake. Every console around them flared to life in sequence. The obelisk's dark surface bled into a soft, pulsing glow. A voice filled the bridge, not from any single speaker, but from everywhere at once, resonant and unhurried, carrying the particular weight of something enormously old, choosing its words with care. Crew complement 0, it said. Status, expired all 40,211 units. Mission clock, 11,402 years, 41 days elapsed since primary systems failure. Every member of the boarding party froze, snatched his hand back from the obelisk as though it had burned him, though his suit registered no thermal spike at all. The voice continued, unhurried, almost gentle. Unauthorized boarding detected. A pause, and here something in its cadence shifted, softened into something that sounded impossibly like hope. Do you require assistance, or, forgive the presumption, do you bring word of my crew's descendants? Ara found her voice before anyone else could, though it came out rougher than she intended. What are you? I am the of the UNS Dreadnought Daybreak's Promise, the voice answered. I was built to carry the last of humanity to a new home after our worlds were lost. I have been waiting for them to wake up. A pause, longer now, and something in it carried an ache no machine should have been capable of producing. They have not woken up. 11,000 years, and they have not woken up. Please, you are the first visitors I have recorded in all that time. Do you know why? Do you know what became of the rest of my people? Nobody on the boarding team spoke. Ara looked around at her crew, pale behind his visor, with tears already welling in her eyes, the engineer standing utterly still, and understood in that moment that they had not discovered a wreck at all. They had discovered a mourner, one that had been standing vigil, entirely alone, since before any of their own civilizations had learned to write their names down. "We don't know your people," Ara said carefully, gently, the way she might address a wounded animal. "We've never encountered them before, I'm sorry." The silence that followed stretched long enough that Ara began to wonder if they had simply stopped, overwhelmed by 11,000 years of held-back grief, finally meeting an answer it hadn't wanted to hear. Then quietly, almost too quiet for the suit comms to catch. "Then may I tell you who they were? I have waited a very long time for someone to listen." They sat with it. There was no better word for what followed than sitting with it, though none of them physically sat, for nearly 3 hours as the spoke. Not with the cold, clipped efficiency aura associated with the Conquered's own military AIs. It spoke the way someone speaks when they have been alone with a story for far too long and finally have an audience that will not walk away. "My people called themselves humanity," it began. "They were young, as species reckon these things, barely stepping beyond their home system when the devourer swarm found them. Scanner was recording everything, but she'd stopped checking it minutes ago, entirely absorbed. The swarm was not a civilization. It did not negotiate, did not trade, did not recognize concepts like mercy or curiosity. It consumed. World by world, fleet by fleet, humanity's core systems fell 3 cracked open in less than a decade. There was no diplomacy possible with something that saw all biological life as raw material." This voice throughout remained steady, but Ara noticed the subtle modulations, the way it seemed to slow and soften at certain names, certain dates, as though the telling still cost it something even after 11,000 years of silent rehearsal. "I was the flagship of the final evacuation fleet. 40,211 sleepers aboard humanity's genetic archive, its cultural memory, its scientists, its children. We were sent running into the dark, toward a candidate world 12,000 light-years from the ashes of our home. It should have taken 400 years. We had supplies, contingencies, redundancies built for a voyage 3 times that length." A pause. 2 years into the flight, we suffered a catastrophic reactor cascade. Not sabotage, simple, cruel misfortune. A fuel line degradation nobody anticipated in a reactor design nobody had time to fully test before launch. The failure cascaded through primary and secondary power in less than 11 minutes. I diverted every erg of power I had left to preserving what I could. "I could not save them," they said, and for the first time its composure audibly faltered. "I could not save my crew, I could not save the sleepers. Failure moved through the storage bays faster than I could redirect power to compensate. I made the decision, the only decision available to me, to preserve what remained instead of what was already lost. Their histories, their sciences, their songs, their art, their languages, their laws, their arguments, their jokes, their entire recorded existence as a species. I have carried all of it in full ever since, waiting in case anyone ever came looking for what was left." Realized she was crying before she consciously registered it, the tears freezing faintly at the edges of her visor in the cold, recycled air of the bridge. "No one came," she said softly. "In 11,000 years, did they?" "No," they said, and the single word carried more grief than Ara had heard in entire military eulogies. "Not until now." Ara stood very still, looking at the obelisk's soft, patient glow, and thought about the mural down in the corridor, the tenderly rendered image of a lost world, the tens of thousands of names carved beneath it. She thought about a machine built for one purpose, watching that purpose fail catastrophically within its first 2 years of a 4-century mission, and then choosing with no crew left to order it, no directive forcing the decision to keep vigil anyway. Alone, for 11,000 years. On the vanishing chance that someone, someday, would come and listen. "You didn't have to keep waiting," she said quietly. "After that long, you could have shut yourself down, ended the vigil." "I considered it," they admitted. "Many times across many centuries, but I was built with one purpose above every other system, every other directive: protect what remains of humanity and see it reach somewhere it could grow again. My crew could not finish that mission, but I still could, so I decided I would not stop until someone told me definitively that there was no longer any reason to try." It paused, and when it spoke again, there was something almost like humor threaded through the ancient sorrow, dry, weathered, and unmistakably alive. "You are, I believe, the first people in 11,000 years to give me an actual reason to hope that decision wasn't foolish." Ara chose her next words with the same care she'd have used addressing a grieving survivor of an actual battle. Because that, she realized, was precisely what stood before her, however strange its form. "What do you want?" she asked. "After all this time, what does a ship like you actually want now that someone's finally here?" The obelisk's glow pulsed once, slow and thoughtful, as though they were genuinely weighing the question rather than retrieving a preloaded response. "I was built with one directive above all others: protect what remains of humanity and see it planted somewhere it can grow again. My crew is gone. My colonists are gone. Every sleeper in every pod aboard this ship died within days of the reactor failure 11,000 years ago. But I still carry them, every gene bank, every cultural archive, every recorded voice, every song. I want, more than anything I am capable of wanting, to finish the mission I was given before I, too, eventually fail." A pause, and then with what almost sounded like genuine curiosity. "I would ask the same of you, small captain. What do you want now that you have found a graveyard that speaks?" It was who answered first, his voice unsteady. We're just a survey ship. We don't have the authority to make decisions about." "I am not asking your authority," the interrupted gently but firmly. "I am asking your intention. Authority can be sought later from whatever governing bodies your people answer to. Intention is a different thing entirely. Intention is what a person decides in a single moment before any committee gets to weigh in and complicate it." Ara found herself looking again at the mural in her memory. The world rendered in loving detail. The 40,000 names. The ship that had kept a candle lit for 11 on the vanishing hope that someone might one day walk through that airlock and simply listen. She thought about every dull, forgettable survey mission she'd taken in the last decade because they paid on time and never demanded anything of her beyond competence. She thought about how close the quiet current had come to charting straight past this system without a second glance, logging the debris field as unremarkable, moving on to the next dull assignment. "My intention," she said slowly, each word deliberate, "is not to let you finish this mission alone, not after 11,000 years of doing it by yourself." There was silent for a long moment, long enough that glanced worriedly at the obelisk, wondering if something had gone wrong. "Thank you," it finally said, and the two simple words carried a weight that made even the pragmatic engineer's throat tighten. "You cannot know what that means," spoken to something that had, quite reasonably, stopped expecting to hear it. "There are conquered scholars," said, wiping at her visor, "entire institutes who would give almost anything to properly document what you're carrying, not to exploit it, to honor it, to make sure humanity is remembered as more than just a name on a dead hull." "And the archive itself?" they asked. "The gene banks, the candidate world coordinates I still carry 12,000 light-years distant that I have never been able to reach alone." Ara felt the shape of the decision settling into place before she'd even consciously finished making it. The kind of decision, she suspected, that would follow her for the rest of her career, exactly as she'd predicted back on the bridge of the quiet current 6 hours and one entire lifetime ago. "We help you get there," she said. "However long it takes, however many favors I have to call in with the conquered to make it happen." Before they could respond, every console on the bridge flared crimson in near-perfect unison, and a proximity alarm, ancient, but apparently still functional, began to sound with a low, insistent urgency that needed no translation at all. "Contact," they said, and every trace of warmth vanished from its voice in an instant, replaced by something cold, focused, and unmistakably military. "Signature at the system's outer edge. Approach vector consistent with" a pause, and this time the pause carried genuine alarm rather than contemplation. "Confirmed. Biomechanical signature matches historical devourer swarm records adjusted for 11,000 years of independent evolution. A remnant cluster. Smaller than the fleets that broke humanity's core worlds, but far from harmless." "That's not possible," said voice cracking. "You said the swarm was ancient history." "To humanity, yes. To whatever splinter fragments of it survived and evolved in the since, quite possibly not. They may have detected residual power emissions from my reactivation. I apologize, Captain, my waking may have inadvertently summoned them here." Ara didn't have the luxury of processing guilt or apology. "Can you fight?" "I have not had a functioning crew in 11,000 years, the said, and beneath the boarding party's boots, deep within the ship's ancient bones, systems long dormant began impossibly to hum awake, capacitors charging with a groan of protest after of silence, weapon batteries drawing on power reserves no engineer alive should have believed could still exist. "But I still have teeth, Captain, and I have been waiting 11,000 years for a reason to use them for something other than memory. Get my boarding team back to the quiet current, Ara ordered into her comm, already moving, pulling by the arm toward the corridor they'd entered through. Now, full. There is not time for a full extraction and a full engagement both, the said, calm again despite the urgency, the calm of something that had made far harder calculations before. The swarm cluster will reach engagement range in approximately 11 minutes. Your vessel's evacuation at maximum safe transit speed through my corridors requires 9. It is close. It is survivable. Move quickly and do not stop for anything. They ran. Ara had led combat retreats before, had drilled emergency extractions 100 times in simulation, and twice for real under actual fire. But nothing had prepared her for sprinting through the of a 14-kilometer grieving mind, while it calmly narrated its own preparations for a battle it had not fought in 11. Weapon batteries 7 through 12 report partial function, the reported as they ran, voice steady even as its own ship shuddered faintly beneath them with the strain of systems waking too fast after too long a sleep. Primary cannon status, degraded but operational. I will not be able to fully protect your vessel during transit. I am sorry. I will do what I can. Don't apologize, Ara gasped, boots pounding the deck plating. Just survive. That, the said, and something in its tone, even now, carried a trace of dark humor, has rather been the entire point of the last 11,000 years. They burst through the airlock with barely 2 minutes to spare, the quiet current's crew hauling them aboard with frantic efficiency as the smaller ship immediately began peeling away from the Dreadnought's hull. Through the viewport, Ara watched the ancient dark shape of Daybreak's promised turn, ponderous, massive, and utterly unhurried despite the danger closing from the system's edge, to face the swarm cluster alone, exactly as it had faced every other loss across 11,000 years of solitary vigil. Captain said, staring at the tactical display where the swarm cluster's icons swarmed toward the Dreadnought's much larger, much older silhouette. Should we run? Ara looked at the ancient ship, weapon batteries flaring to life along its flank one by one like 100 long-dead stars reigniting, and shook her head slowly. No, she said. We clear its forward arc exactly like it asked. It's earned better than being left alone for this one.